This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, folks, so we are in chapter 15, the endocrine system. So the endocrine system is a system that really controls other systems and works with the body in order to help maintain homeostasis. So when we think of what controls the body, we think of the nervous system and the endocrine system. So both systems have control over what takes place with the functions of the body. Now, the nervous system we already discussed and looked at, right, previously, as far as the nervous system and the special senses, right, the sensory system, right, all a part of that nervous system. Now, we're going to be looking at the endocrine system, which doesn't use so much electrical stimulants and stimulation and action potentials, that bioelectricity, in order to create change and create some type of communication between one part of the body and the other. But we're now using the endocrine system, which uses chemicals. They are chemical messengers called hormones. Chemical messengers. It's a secretion produced by a gland, released into the blood, and it'll travel to some part of the body to cause some type of change. Secretions. These are ductless glands. A duct, ductless. So those exocrine glands, like the sweat glands, like the oil glands, they have a duct. They have a tube in which the secretion is going to pass through, right? But when we're talking about hormones, produced in one area of the body by a gland, released into the bloodstream, into your blood vessels, and then there's no ducts present for those, okay? Just so you get the idea as far as what's going on, as far as the differentiating between an exocrine and an endocrine gland. So endocrine glands. All right, so I'm going to move on into the slides. And we're going to see again, these are the hormones, we're giving you that. Now, an important term for you to know would be that they go to target cells. So where they are released into the bloodstream, there have to be specific cells of tissues where these hormones are going to cause some type of change to take place. So we've talked about thyroid hormone, we mentioned it, right? And when you think of thyroid hormone, we say it's right on the board here, a major, so thyroid hormone. It is a major metabolic hormone. Okay. And what goes on with this is that it really can control what's taking place as far as the functions of the body and functions of all aspects of the body. Okay. And what I would tell you is that if you have too much thyroid hormone, right, too much, it's like you're putting the accelerator, pressing the accelerator of a car, and you're pressing it down. Do you remember that analogy? I gave that to you a while ago. But you're pushing down on the accelerator, the car goes faster. Well, think about if I have too much thyroid hormone, the processes of the body are sped up. Okay, that's called hyperthyroidism. 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 Everything is sped up. All processes sped up. Hypothyroidism is the opposite. So you can imagine that if you're driving a car and you press on the brake and you press on the brake pretty hard, but not hard enough to stop it, but hard enough to slow it down as far as the car is concerned. This is hypothyroidism. Everything is moving in slow-mo. So hypothyroidism, processes are all slow. Okay. So that's just giving you an example of one hormone in particular, that how this hormone affects what's going on with the body. And if you have too much of it, speeds everything up. So what would happen if you sped up the processes of the body? So what about in terms of, say, like your heart rate, your heartbeat, right? How about your blood pressure? How about your respiratory rate, your rate of breathing? How about having increases in other types of processes going on? Not good long term. Short term, not a big deal, but long term, not good, not positive. And then hypothyroidism, imagine that you're working in slow-mo, right? That things are processes in your body are just not working like they should. You kind of feel really tired, and it's just not a good situation. So both are not good. So homeostasis and negative feedback, remember negative feedback? That's a way that if we have too much hormone, the body can regulate and reduce the amount of hormone that's being kicked out so that we don't have the processes of hyper or hypothyroidism, okay, through this negative feedback. So I said to you that the nervous system and the endocrine system, they're working together to control the body and to maintain homeostasis, the stable environment within the body, no matter what's going on outside of the body. Now, as far as systems are concerned, the nervous system, very fast. Things are happening very quickly, okay? As far as the communication, if I touch something hot, what happens? What does my hand do? Whoa, it goes right away, right? So it's a withdrawal reflex. It happens very fast. How about the endocrine system? See where it says here? Slower acting, longer lasting. Highlight that, circle that, whatever, right? It's important to know. That's a way to differentiate the endocrine system in comparison to the nervous system. Slower acting, longer lasting. Now this next slide here, you'll see it says 2 or 3 hormones may affect the same process. Now, some can work in conjunction with, so like synergistically, hormones cooperate to produce the effect. They work together. Permissive, one hormone can exert its effect only if another hormone primes the target cell. So they kind of work together, but it's the one hormone that's really causing the change to take place. And opposing, right up on top here, one hormone opposes the effect of another. So if one has the effect of increasing something, some levels within the body, the other will do what? Have an effect to decrease the levels of whatever that may be within the body. And we'll see examples of this as we go on. This image here, if you look in your packets, so in your packets, and then I've just, for those that are on class here on campus, I made these a little bit bigger for you just so that you can take a look at and view it while you're looking at your PowerPoint. And here you're just seeing that these are the major hormones, major endocrine glands involved in the endocrine system and producing hormones that will cause and create a major effect within the body, right? Causing change to take place. So you've got a deep center within the brain called the hypothalamus. You've got the pituitary gland, again, present within the brain. You've got the pineal gland. These are all going to produce specific hormones that will cause change to take place within the body. Then if you go down, you go inferiorward, you see here the thyroid gland. You've got then the thymus gland. You've got the adrenal glands resting on top of the kidneys, the pancreas, and whether it's male or female, female for the ovaries and male for the testes. As far as these are also involved in, again, producing these hormones that will make major changes within the body, okay? All right, so you'll see here. So types of hormones and their signals. So again, we said that the hormones are these chemical messengers. We have steroid and non-steroid hormones. And you're going to see in a moment there, as far as in the images, what's taking place as far as where they can go or what they don't have access to as far as the cell is concerned. But they all have to, this is very important, you want to highlight this, hormones bind to protein receptors on the target cells. So the cells of the tissues of the body, right, have these receptors that will receive these hormones, and this is going to contribute to the change that will take place, whatever the cells of the tissues of the organs of the body that we're trying to do. So know that that thyroid hormone, throughout the whole body, there are these receptors present to cause change. Okay, so thyroid hormone, there are these special receptors present for thyroid hormone throughout all the tissues of the body. You'll see here it says, causes cell activity to change. So it causes some type of change to take place within the body, right? That's an important thing to remember with the hormones. Steroid hormones interact with the cell DNA. Non-steroid hormones act indirectly. So they don't actually go, they don't actually enter into the cell to cause some type of change. So steroid hormones, they can pass right into, and you're going to see that here with this next image. And again, looking your packets, and I've provided a larger image for you here regarding this. So page 2 of the packet with just the images, right? So you're seeing there that it's the same image you're seeing here on the board. And it's just showing you that on the left side that you're looking at, a steroid hormone molecule is moved from the blood into the fluid of the interstitial fluid that's outside of this cell. And it's going to actually penetrate and pass through that plasma membrane, that cell membrane, and enter into the cell. But a non-steroid hormone will not do that. Okay, and so that's different. You'll see that it's going to have to act outside of the cell for there to cause change within the cell. Okay. So the difference between the two, one can enter the cell, one is not going to enter the cell. Now, as we look at these structures present within the brain, the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland are the most important, honestly, they are the most important endocrine structures to cause change to take place. We can say that the pituitary gland is the master gland. You can write that down. The pituitary gland, it's the master gland. It's very important, okay? Stores and releases hormones made by the hypothalamus, that structure in the brain. The hypothalamus, it's really the controller of what takes place. It's a controller in the brain. It controls what takes place with the endocrine system. So if that pituitary gland is the most important structure present within the endocrine system, the glands are concerned, then the hypothalamus controls that pituitary gland. So that portion of the brain, very important. And interesting how these important structures are very deep within the brain. So they're really important. So the brain does all it, the body does all it can to protect these structures because they're necessary for life. This next image here is showing you that. So look up here and you'll see that this area right here, that's called the hypothalamus right up in through in here. And it's going to be connected to the pituitary gland. Your pituitary gland produces many hormones, okay? And without the hypothalamus communicating with and telling the pituitary gland to secrete, to synthesize, make, to create, to make, and release these hormones, the endocrine system is going to really have a hard time. So if you have a pituitary tumor, so for folks who have gigantism, it's one situation where someone is like really tall and they're not tall just because of genetics, but they're tall because they have a tumor. It's this adenoma that's present within the pituitary gland that creates all kinds of problems. And it'll create a situation where, in addition to affecting many other systems, you'll release more growth hormone, which will in turn allow for someone to grow to very large stature. Okay. But you'll see here that we're looking at right now the fact that the hypothalamus will create two hormones. antidiuretic hormone. It's called ADH, and also oxytocin. Oxytocin helps to birth a baby. So when you are, when a person is in labor and they are, excuse me, folks, turn off my phone. All right, just gonna turn off my phone. All right, so these two hormones, oxytocin I just mentioned to you. So this is important for the actual increasing contractions, the strength of contractions and the frequency of contractions in order to birth a baby. Go ahead. Yeah, well, it's just that it's not so much more, but just secreted at a time when it's needed. Yeah, but now also oxytocin. So the bond that you create between partners, right? Between whoever your significant other is, oxytocin is released also to really like increase the bond between people. So this is why it's hard. Like when you do break up with someone, it's not only just it is physical and chemical as well as mental, as far as the ability that you have for this. Now I don't mean mental in a bad way. I mean just the psychological aspect of it. Go ahead, please. Yeah, it reinforces those strong feelings. So it does reinforce feelings. Yeah. So oxytocin is a very important hormone. Okay. ADH, antidiuretic hormone. So this is a hormone that really controls how much urine you release from your body. Now that might not be such a big deal in thinking about it now, but understand that. So if you're in a situation where it's hot and it's summer outside and you're sweating, right? So do you really need to produce a whole lot of urine while you're sweating? And you want to conserve water. So write this down. ADH, that ADH, it's a water conserving hormone. Water conserving hormone. Water conserving hormone. Did I spell it wrong? Oh, okay. Water conserving hormone. Okay. So let's see here. Let's read the slide for a moment here. So secretory neurons in the hypothalamus. So this is a part of the brain. Produce, synthesize, create ADH or oxytocin. Now, the ADH or oxytocin moves downward inside the axons of the secretory neurons and accumulate here. They go to the posterior aspect of it. They go to one region of the pituitary gland. Action potentials, or these bioelectricity, release these hormones, which enter the blood capillaries. See the capillaries here. And then that will then in turn go into the blood. So the hormone molecules move into the general circulation and go to the target cells of the target tissues of the body. Go ahead. Okay, let's hear.
So is that why like certain serial killers just don't care because they don't have oxytocin?
I don't know that that's ever been studied. I mean, have you ever read a study on that?
No idea.
Okay, understood. So yeah, so I would say absolutely that there's things going on. It's multifaceted. I mean, there's multiple contributions to that person who has that kind of a deviant behavior. Yeah, yeah. So could it be there's also chemical imbalance? I wouldn't doubt that there's major things going on because the majority of the people in the world are not going around killing people, right? So so yeah, so that's good thoughts as far as trying to think. Well, can certain chemicals, neurotransmitters can absolutely be a part of those kind of situations for sure. Now, you'll see here, as far as looking at the next slide, so this is also in the packet of showing you. You go into the next page of that packet, and you'll see that there's a chart there, and it's just showing you these two images, right? And on the bottom chart, it's showing you that ADH and oxytocin, they're created by that hypothalamus. Then you'll see that the anterior portion of that pituitary gland, it's producing itself ACTH, TSH, FSH, LH, PRL, and GH. So you've got there these major hormones that are being produced by the front, the anterior portion of the pituitary gland. The posterior part, that other piece of the pituitary gland, it's only receiving those hormones that were already produced by the brain, by the hypothalamus. So what's the deal then as far as what's going on with these hormones produced by the anterior pituitary gland? Why would that really be a big deal? Well, these are hormones that are going to go to specific glands that will then in turn produce and release their hormones. So look at this for a moment. So this ACTH produced by the adrenal gland, pardon me, by the pituitary gland, go to the adrenal glands. Remember, those sit on top of your kidneys. Remember, adrenal glands are really one of the aspects of what they produce is adrenaline, right? That's one aspect of it. But you'll see here also cortisol, very important hormone for when we're under stress. Well, that ACTH needs to be sent to the adrenal glands in order for that cortisol to be released. So you can see like one has to affect the other. And if it's not released and affecting one to produce another chemical, that's a problem. Okay. How about this next one? Thyroid stimulating hormone, also known as thyrotropin, TSH. That goes to the thyroid gland because the thyroid gland will produce, it'll create and release thyroid hormone. But if that TSH is not being sent by the pituitary gland to the thyroid gland, what's going to happen? Will the hormones from the thyroid gland be released? No. Okay, so that's a big deal. That's a problem. And you just need to ask someone who actually has hyper or hypothyroidism and ask them how much fun it is to suffer with that. And you can only understand that it's a big deal. It's very important. So really, there's a very delicate balance that goes on as far as these chemicals are concerned. Okay. So we saw there the anterior pituitary gland. It's creating and releasing these hormones that you see on this next slide. Now, let's go back for a moment and just look at the rest of those hormones. So you then have this follicle stimulating hormone. So in females, you see that in females and males, it's both has some type of special function. And without it being released, that special function is not going to work like it properly should. Okay? So in terms of FSH, this follicle stimulating hormone, it's going to stimulate estrogen secretion. Remember we talked about, and I mentioned to you about estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. These are all hormones. They're very important. This leads to egg maturation. So in order for an egg to be released, you need this hormone in order to do that, in order to contribute to the egg within the ovaries to be released upon ovulation. And if an egg is not released upon ovulation mid-cycle, you're not going to end up having the ability to get pregnant. Does that make sense? For the sperm to interact with the egg and to fertilize the egg, it's not going to happen if it's not released. So that follicle stimulating hormone, very important. Luteinizing hormone, you'll see here, in females stimulates progesterone secretion, and estrogen and progesterone secretion are very important in order to thicken the lining of the uterus to prepare the uterus for implantation of a fertilized egg. Does that make sense, right? Because what happens during the cycle where there's menses, the bleeding begins, right? That's the thickening of the lining of that uterus. It sheds away. So, and that's correlating with, and I shared this with you just so that you can see it, and then I'll also talk about it at the end of the semester when we look at male and female reproductive system. But this is just gives you a chart regarding what goes on as far as the levels of different hormones and how it affects what's happening as far as with the lining of the uterus as well as the release of the egg. Look at it for a moment if you don't mind. Can you pull this one out for a moment? This one's color. And you'll see where it says at the top of the page, ovarian cycle, and then it says ovulation. That's when the egg that's been matured is released out into the actual fallopian tubes, the uterine tubes. Okay, and that's when there's the possibility to have implantation of or fertilization, and then implantation. You'll see it down below. That's representing the lining of the uterus and how it gets thicker, and it's very vascular. Right? That's needed for that fertilized egg in order to develop, to implant and develop and become a little embryo, little child, right? So that's really important. So those two hormones, you'll see for the males, FSH stimulates sperm formation, and then LH stimulates testosterone secretion as well as sperm release. Prolactin, also you'll see here, this is important for its prolactation. So in order for a female to actually be able to breastfeed, right, and to produce milk, prolactin is important. It's prolactation, production of milk for, and oxytocin also contributes to that. You'll see here, it kind of contributes to the movement of the milk out of the breast and to the ducts so that it can be released. Growth hormone promotes growth in young, causes protein synthesis, cell division, roles in glucose, protein metabolism in adults. And so if we have too much growth hormone, gigantic proportions. Too little growth hormone, someone's really small, right? And so in anywhere in between growth hormone. So let's take a look actually I'll show you an interesting video. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'm going to put up the active camera. So we're going to watch a video. And this video is on a type of condition called Proteus syndrome. All right, so this is a 4-minute video, so it's not too long. So pay attention, I think you'll find it very interesting.
I had 10 surgeries by age 14. The culmination of that was amputation of my left foot.
Jerry DeVries suffers from one of the rarest diseases known. It's called Proteus syndrome, and it causes overgrowth that can be crippling or deadly.
Back when I was a child, again, nobody knew what Proteus syndrome was. It wasn't even named until 1983 as a condition. That's how rare it is.
A lot of people with the syndrome don't live past their 20s. At 61, DeVries is the oldest known man living with the condition, but he didn't receive a diagnosis until he was 40 years old. For the last 2 decades, he has volunteered to be poked, prodded, and studied in the hopes of developing a cure.
I told them at that point, use me however you need to. Let's find a cure for this or a control for this condition.
This genetic mutation affects only a few hundred people in the world. One was Kim Green's son, Alex, who passed away from the condition when he was 9 years old.
Alex looked perfectly normal at birth. You know, he had one of his fingers was just a little bit big. He had a big vein going down his leg, but otherwise he was normal. He progressed very quickly, and his finger grew from, being this big to this big to this big.
Using Alex's DNA, National Institute of Health researchers discovered the cause of the condition in 2011, a single gene that tells the body to make a growth protein.
My understanding is that proteins are like a light switch where you can brighten and dim the lights. Proteins should brighten and dim depending on what the body needs. This particular protein in Proteus syndrome is always on 100%.
In 2017, DeVries was one of 3 adults and 3 children to participate in the first study of a drug to treat the condition called murinertib.
He had a lot of extra tests done on him with a low probability that it would actually help him. Those are the special people that are willing to be tested to help others.
I had 7 MRIs one day. I was in that tube for close to 5 hours.
The initial study was promising, especially for younger participants.
So the rate in which these growths were occurring slowed down and in some cases even regressed. And the pain which they had was much less than before they started therapy.
Though DeVries said he didn't experience any improvement during the initial study, he is participating in the first ever clinical trials for this drug. The trial is currently underway, and if all goes well, the drug could be FDA approved in about 2 years.
We expect to see shrinkage of these lesions, softening of these lesions, but most important that their quality of life, they're able to move around better, they're able to do their day-to-day functioning better.
It's scary because I have to look at my Proteus kids and recommend them going on a drug that at the end of the day, you think it's safe, it seems safe, there's not really any side effects, but there's just a lot more testing to be done. It's just life as a guinea pig.
But it's a risk that families and patients like DeVries are willing to take.
I realized that I had a responsibility for those younger people. And what that means is that whatever I can do to advance the research and bring relief and lengthen the life of these children that are growing up with that, that's my goal. That's what I want to do.
It's hard as a mom to lose a child, obviously, and we're still losing children to this syndrome. It's just been a very, very long road, and to hear that we have a drug that might actually work and might save lives is beyond amazing. Who's the best mommy in the world? You.
Yeah, so, this is a pretty remarkable type of syndrome. And so can you see how having issues with growth hormone, right, and affecting just how it affects certain regions of the body? So that's Proteus syndrome. So gigantism, we've got growing to gigantic proportions. In Proteus syndrome, there's some other processes going on regarding growth, but they only affect certain regions of the body, not every aspect of the body. So it could make the cervical spine, your neck, longer and bigger as far as the size is concerned, or different digits in your fingers or your feet. It really plays havoc with the body. If you've ever heard of the Elephant Man, has anybody ever, there was a movie called The Elephant Man, and there was, yeah, so there was a gentleman who experienced, he had this syndrome, Proteus syndrome. They didn't think so at first. They thought that he had another type of illness, but he absolutely, we can pretty much deduce that this is the presentation that he was presenting, looking like with his body and such, and the deformities that were taking place. I want to put another, I'll put another video on in a little while. Let's just continue on with the PowerPoint. Okay. I'm going to turn on the light in just a moment. I'll share my screen back with you all online. Okay, let's see. Hi, everyone. Okay, so this image right here, so I've provided some extra images in the PowerPoint just to give you an idea regarding what's going on with the part of your brain called the hypothalamus and the different aspects of the pituitary gland and what they produce as far as these hormones are concerned. So it's just giving you the same information, but just in a different way. And really the body, in this case, it's showing the anterior is on this side and the posterior is on the other side. So anterior, posterior, just a different way as far as than the other image that was shown. Here we have it's reversed. Anterior is going in the different direction, posterior, but again, it's giving you hormones that are being released and the target cells or the target tissues, just giving it to you in a different presentation. And this one also showing you the different hormones as well as where they're being produced and released by. And one more, and then let's go to, yeah, and this one's just showing you, this one is just showing you the opposite of when the hormones were released by the hypothalamus, produced by and sent to the posterior pituitary. This is showing you how the hypothalamus, that part of the brain, will control what's going on with the release of these hormones that are produced by the anterior pituitary. This slide right here is good to see in that it's showing you how one area of the body, as far as in the endocrine system is concerned, can affect the other area. So the hypothalamus is in the brain. The anterior pituitary is in the brain. So this hormone, TRH, that's produced by the hypothalamus, goes to the anterior pituitary, that pituitary gland. In turn, because it released that hormone, that anterior pituitary gland will release TSH. Will then in turn go to the thyroid gland, which will then produce thyroid hormone. So do you see how there's multiple steps that take place in order for thyroid hormone to be produced and released? And if it's not, if there's a blockage somewhere here, you're not going to have the thyroid hormone being released. And again, I said that that's a major metabolic hormone. Not only does it affect as far as how the regulation of many activities take place, but if you don't have thyroid hormone present when you're growing, thyroid hormone can affect that both hands grow at the same length, both arms grow at the same length, or the lower extremity growing at the same length. That's thyroid hormone working with growth hormone. So it's a really important hormone. But again, remembering that it's a hormone, a hormone that's produced by a gland going to another part of the body, causing change, and that other part of the body needs to have, this target cells need to have those receptors to be able to receive. It's like a key in a door. If I have, say, this door is a receptor for thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone is the key. I can open up the door. Without the thyroid hormone entering that key, being the key for that specific receptor, the door won't open and the change won't take place. So first question. Yeah, so then that's an issue that those patients have to take artificial thyroid hormone in order to try to maintain the levels of this thyroid hormone so that they can function well. Yeah, there are many people. That can be a problem down the road. Yeah, that can definitely affect other, and it affects not only just one part of the body, it affects all body systems. All body systems, yeah.
Hormones, are they like just activate what's already in the cell to start the change, or are the hormones necessary for the change?
Yeah, they're necessary to make the change, to create the change. They are necessary to create the change. Without them, and so like, but yeah, so good point in that when you're thinking of like the steroid hormone is going to go into the cell, right? That's something different from the non-steroid hormone, which can't go into the cell. It can't enter that plasma membrane, and so it's not interacting directly. But the steroid hormones, they can actually be a part of the change because they're going directly into the cell and working with the DNA. Yeah. Now, this next slide here. All right, so hormones typically regulate activities that occur over an extended period. So you understand that the nervous system, fast acting, right? Fast acting, creating change, but it doesn't last long, right? And it can contribute to like muscle contraction, movement of the body, that kind of thing, right? Nervous system, fast acting. The endocrine system, slower acting, longer lasting. Okay, so the effect that, and so having hormones present really can cause change over long periods of time, extended periods of time. That's an important sentence right there, and that's why I highlighted that there. So you'll see here, growth hormone, and we mentioned this already, gigantism. But how about if we have growth hormone being released and a person is beyond puberty, they're beyond the age to grow. So, you know, by whether it's 18 or 21, depending upon the person, right? And depending upon the sex, this will also be an issue, the gender. You stop growing. So I stopped growing in height. Yet my body, because there's an adenoma, there's a tumor in my adrenal gland, not my adrenal gland, my pituitary gland, thank you. The growth hormone is being kicked out. So what's going to happen to the body? Anybody know the wrestler Andre the Giant? He's just one of them, right? But did you ever see that, like Andre the Giant, when he was younger, and then as he had gotten older, and he only died, I think he was less than 50 when he passed away. His face changed. And what happens with growth hormone is that your chin, your nose, your forehead, your hands, your feet, they continue to grow. So even if you stop growing in height, those areas of your body, if there's a lot of growth hormone going on, they're going to increase the size of those areas. Now, your nose, it does continue to grow. That's just, and gravity contributes to that, right? But that's different from this growth hormone situation. Primarily, it grows in that it's just kind of like lengthening because of gravity. That's what I'd say with your nose. But yes. Now, so I'm sorry, I misspoke. Kind of like, it's not so much that it grows. It does lengthen, but it's not that it's like really growing per se, because of the fact that, what's that? No. It's not like Pinocchio, right? So it's just a matter of that because of gravity. Gravity has the effect of like pushing on things, and so the nose can lengthen a bit. Yeah, because of gravity. So, but anyhow, but getting back to acromegaly. So acromegaly is when people have too much growth hormone, right? Growth hormone is being kicked out, and they stop growing in height. So their face. So there's some changes that occur, and I'm going to show you some images and some pictures of that. So acromegaly. So those of you online, I'm going to bring you back over to the computer, over to the screen. Stop sharing my screen. Active camera. Okay. All right. So those of you on campus, let's take a look and see as far as these images regarding acromegaly and the changes that can occur. And then we're going to watch a short video. So acromegaly. So just show you some images of people as they have changed. And so here's another one too. Like this shows you Andre the Giant. It also shows you this other fella. I forget his name. Okay, there you go. But do you see how large his chin is? Right. That's pretty remarkable. That's as a result of stop growing in height, yet still growing as far as other features of the body. This is interesting. And so this would be, just see. All right. So this woman here, so from 1977 to 88, you see the changes that took place within her face. So her lips also grew in size, her nose, her forehead, her chin. So it just changes your features. And again, too, it can affect the hands getting larger as well as the feet getting larger. Okay? I'm going to show you a video regarding someone who, let's see here. Just take me a moment just to find it. All right, let me find this here. Okay. So this is from a show a few years back from the doctors. And that's just a commercial. Just a couple seconds, that'll be done. Okay. All right, pay attention to this. It's only
Young
a
people,
few minutes.
but what happens when your body continues growing and changing for years afterward and nobody can figure out why? For Rebecca, her late teens and 20s were a roller coaster ride of extreme body changes, which she says caused her to grow inexplicably upward every single year. Her nose, jaw, and chin continued to grow until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Her feet ballooned from a size 8 to a size 10. Meanwhile, doctors diagnosed her with a range of conditions from vitamin deficiency to prediabetes to polycystic ovarian syndrome to body dysmorphic disorder to anxiety and even depression. When she lost her vision temporarily, an ER doctor blamed stress. Her breaking point came on her 29th birthday this past year when she couldn't even get out of bed. Finally, she found a doctor who believed she had the clue to this medical mystery, and she just needed a blood test to confirm it. Rebecca joins us now via Skype. Rebecca, thanks so much for being here on the show. That tape piece we just watched ended on a cliffhanger. Can you tell us what the culprit was for these issues you were dealing with?
Sure. I was finally diagnosed with acromegaly. It's a tumor on the pituitary gland.
So you had a tumor on your pituitary gland causing your body to secrete way too much growth hormone, and obviously you're not understanding what's going on with your body. What did it feel like when you finally had a diagnosis?
I could have been devastated, but at the point, after 9 years of being misdiagnosed for so long, I was almost relieved to finally know what was going on with my body.
And in fact, once the diagnosis was made based on that x-ray, they had to do brain surgery on your pituitary gland. I understand they went through the nose to remove that tumor, and your symptoms improved.
Yes, actually, within 24 hours, post-surgery, all of my hormones were back to normal, and I no longer needed any medication. So I was on quite a bit of medications before. Yeah.
And the vision problems you were having too, those immediately got better, I would assume.
I'll need a special set of glasses that are not the most fashionable, but getting there.
And when you were seeing doctors, but you were continuing to not get better, like what were you thinking? What were you feeling?
Well, I was extremely frustrated because I was just getting types of diagnoses that I knew were almost symptoms, and now I know that they were just symptoms from the pituitary tumor, but they weren't going further. And I knew there was something more, especially when I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I had no reason to have anxiety, but I was constantly stuck in fight or flight mode due to actually an adrenal insufficiency caused by the tumor.
I understand it can be hard for one individual doctor at any given point in time to notice these changes, which clearly occurred over many years for you. And it really does highlight this element of being your own health advocate. You knew this wasn't due to stress or anxiety and all those changes that were happening to you physically. There's really no explanation for that other than hormonal issues that clearly they weren't able to crack the code. I'm curious because obviously for so many years your body was awash in too much growth hormone, and obviously your hormones are very much out of whack. How overall do you feel now? And also, what are your doctors who are specialists in endocrinology telling you about sort of the future now that your hormones are finally back where they should be?
I've seen quite a few changes. My face is actually kind of morphing back. So as you could tell in the pictures, my nose was quite a bit wider. My chin was a little bit longer due to tissue growth. So a lot of my soft tissue has been shrinking. I feel hot and cold things more now, so it feels good to like be normal again, I guess.
We're just so happy that you finally know the diagnosis, had a resolution through this surgery, and we just hope that the rest of your life is filled with happiness.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's part of the things that's interesting to just make a note of is that with different conditions that we suffer and go through, that there can be times where actual diagnosis of an illness that we're experiencing, that a patient is experiencing, that we're experiencing, can really be very difficult in order to come about to get the specific diagnosis that we need. So, sorry, gang, just give me a moment here. Here, okay. Share my screen with you all and get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so this gentleman right here, he has since passed away. He was the tallest gentleman in the United States. And I forget how long ago he passed away, but it's within a couple of years. But he was, 7'8", and I believe he even was growing. I mean, so I don't recall his final height that he attained. But yeah, this is tough on the body. Imagine, right? So because I saw a documentary on him and the different health issues that he went through as a result of his really big size, his large size and his height, very tough on his body. There we have Andre the Giant. Now, how about if we talk about, here's Andre the Giant. So how about then we also talk about the opposite of what's going on as far as someone who suffers from dwarfism, right? So they're very short, okay? So pituitary makes too little growth hormone, or the receptors don't respond normally like they should and respond to the growth hormone. So as a result, this person is going to be very short. Now, there are different types. How many of you have seen, let's see, so he was in Elf. He was also Peter Dinklage, right? So he's a specific type of dwarf, okay? I think that maybe I have an image. No, okay, thought I did. So he's a specific type of dwarf, and his would be called achondroplasia. See on the left here, achondroplasia. So some of the average sized parts of the body and some shorter than normal parts of the body. So like the torso and the head are out of proportion to the upper and lower extremities. See how they're quite short in that way? Whereas you'll see proportionate dwarfism. So they're just like a regular sized person who's just kind of been shrunk, so to speak, right? So it includes growth hormone deficiency dwarfism, primordial dwarfism, and another type of syndrome. So there are genetic syndromes that are also involved in this. Now, this next image here, this young woman, so you see how her head is very tiny also, right? So she is older now and a little bit taller, but not by much. And she has also cognitive deficiencies in addition to her dwarfism. So she's not fully 100% cognizant of everything that goes on. So she's more of very childlike, even as older as she is now. So now the thyroid and parathyroid glands. Okay, let's look for a moment, folks, as far as on by the wall here, by the windows, and just see. And we can also look at this image here, this model here. So you're seeing thyroid hormone is peeking through right there, but also over here, thyroid hormone, thyroid gland. Here's the thyroid gland right here. Over here, thyroid gland. Okay. So thyroid gland, it's lower in your neck than what you would have thought. You probably would have thought maybe it's up a little bit higher, but it's lower. Okay. And so that thyroid gland producing thyroid hormone, and on the posterior aspect, on the part of it that's in the back, right, the posterior aspect of it is going to have parathyroid glands. So these will both work in conjunction to release different types of hormones. So let's look at the thyroid hormone. So thyroid gland produces this thyroid hormone, sets the basal metabolic rate, meaning the rate by which your body functions. So again, like I said to you, if we have too much of this hormone, you're kind of jacked up. Things are sped up, and as a result, you might be sweating a lot. You might have protruding eyes, lose your hair. There's different things that can occur, as well as increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, increased respiratory rate, how you breathe and such, as if you were exercising and yet you're not exercising. It's not a good thing. Loss of weight, hyperthyroidism. You'll see here that iodine, right, needed. So why do we have iodine in salt? Because everybody, for some aspect, will use salt in their diet or in the foods that we eat, as far as that are produced, mass produced. And iodine will help in the production of thyroid hormone, okay? Now, if we have a deficiency of iodine, you'll see, I'm going to move for a moment here to this slide right there. We'll come back, but I want to just show you that as far as a goiter is concerned, this is an image of a goiter. So an enlargement of the thyroid gland, okay? All right, because really what's going on is that the body, and in particular the thyroid gland, wants to become larger in order to try and grasp at as much iodine as possible. And realize that your thyroid gland is very vascular. There's a lot of blood vessels there in order to really have this blood flowing through to determine whether we need to produce more thyroid hormone or not. Now, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, we talked about. That Graves' disease, that's a form of hyperthyroidism. Graves' disease speeds up the metabolism. Hypothyroidism lowers the metabolism. Now, PTH, write this down. PTH is parathyroid hormone. PTH, parathyroid hormone. Now, this is important because this hormone will interact with your skeletal system. And if we need more calcium in the body for use, parathyroid hormone will do this. It will help to, in working with the skeletal system, break down bone and release calcium into the body in order to increase calcium levels in the blood. So here's just showing you the symptoms of hypothyroidism. This image here next. You'll see here again, different issues we talked about, but it's slowing down the metabolism, hypothyroidism. Here's showing you an example of both hyper and hypothyroidism. And you'll see here, so this young woman, in 2005, she was suffering with hypothyroidism. She had gotten her hormones balanced, and by 2009, 4 years later, see the difference, right? So much of a difference there as far as from hypothyroidism, unchecked, unregulated, to hormones checked and being able to definitely change the appearance. Look here as far as this next slide is concerned, and you're seeing as far as, so that hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the thyroid gland, what's going on as far as how they're all connected, as far as the chemicals, the hormones that are being released by one to it having this ability for step by step. If one's released, then it's going to go to the tissue. So hypothalamus releasing its hormone to the anterior pituitary, that target tissue. Anterior pituitary releasing its hormone to the thyroid gland, and then the thyroid gland releasing that hormone, thyroid hormone, to all the cells of the body. So it affects everything. So thyroid hormone, saying it's a major metabolic hormone is very true. Again, we saw this image of the goiter. Now, as far as hypothyroidism is concerned, so this can also cause issues at birth. And so this is called cretinism. This next slide here. Hypothyroidism at birth. So if there's no thyroid hormone that's being produced, synthesized, and babies are checked for this, folks, by the way, because this can lead to changes that occur that will be permanent, okay? So lack of thyroxine from birth, lack of this thyroid hormone, or before birth, could be from a lack of the thyroid gland, a lack of iodine in the mother. Multiple issues can occur, but here, severe and irreparable mental defects. So issues with cognitive abilities. So they're not, as you or I, right, we're blessed that we have, we're thinking clearly for the most part, and we're actually, we're functioning well. But in the case of these that have cretinism, yeah, they're having decrease in their ability to think and function properly. Stunted growth, so they're very short in stature. Reduced growth and function of many of the organs of the body. So this is cretinism. Hypothyroidism at birth. Hypothyroidism at birth. Let's see here where we're at. All right. So we'll look at 2 more slides and then we'll be done for the day as far as lecture is concerned. So we'll do this slide and another slide. So the adrenal glands, know that there's an outer part of the adrenal gland and an inner part of the adrenal gland. Okay? The outer part is called the cortex. The inner part is called the medulla. Now, the cortex secretes many different hormones. The medulla, that inner part, the inner part of the adrenal gland secretes adrenaline, okay? Adrenaline. So adrenaline is what? Epinephrine, same thing. So it's gonna stimulate the body short term, okay? That's adrenaline, epinephrine, also known as. The cortex, the outer part, right? There are 2 major type of steroid hormones, these glucocorticoids and these mineralocorticoids. And so what will happen is the glucocorticoids will raise the level of blood glucose and cortisol is it. So when you're under stress over extended periods of time and cortisol is being released by your body, can this contribute to the fact that you might be having a hard time losing weight? Yes, right? Also, this cortisol, it affects your immune system. So if we say it's an anti-inflammatory, that means that it's doing what? It's suppressing your immune system. So what happens when you're stressed out? You have high levels of cortisol, and are you susceptible to getting sick easier? Yes, you are, because of that in particular. So this is why you're stressed out. Oh man, why am I sick all the time, right? Part of it is as a result of high levels of cortisol in your body, right? So that's frustrating for sure. And again, affecting weight issues. So here we have, this is a type of disorder called Cushing's syndrome. So very similar to hypothyroidism, but not the same. With Cushing's syndrome, this hypercortisolism, having too much cortisol in the body, the stress hormone, it can lead to obesity, osteoporosis, and other different types of issues going on that are not positive or good or healthy at all. Now, Addison's disease is an opposite of. So just as we talked about, whether you have hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, having low levels of cortisol is Addison's disease or Addison's syndrome. And this was President Kennedy, one of our presidents back in the early 60s. He suffered from Addison's disease. And so this is like someone who is they can't handle stress, unfortunately. So as a result of having very little or non-existent levels of cortisol flowing through their body. Again, remember it's the stress hormone. So if we have low levels of this, our body's going to have issues with handling stress. That's Addison's disease. Yep, and there you go. As far as President Kennedy suffered with Addison. So damage to the adrenal glands can cause a variety of effects in metabolism. One is that symptoms is an increased skin color. And so like a bronzing, they would say, this changing of the coloration as far as melanin is produced and more frequent. Now, this slide here, you'll see as far as then the other aspect, so having issues with the mineralocorticoids. So this is affecting, so adjusting concentration. This can affect what's going on as far as the fluid levels in your body. I think that's simple enough to put it. So when you're having issues with these, you're having issues with fluid level control in your body. And as a result, one is that it'll increase your blood pressure, and it can affect what goes on as far as sex hormone production. Okay? And the last slide here we go, as far as the inner part, the medulla part of your adrenal glands producing the epinephrine, norepinephrine, or the adrenaline. This is like what can speed up the body, prepare the body for action. If you're having issues with this, and how about if your body, if you have my brother had a tumor on his adrenal gland, and as a result, he was having issues with too much adrenaline, too much epinephrine being kicked out, and so his blood pressure was very, very high, and that was very dangerous. So he had surgery done to do this and made a difference in his life. So it helps, the epinephrine, norepinephrine helps regulate blood circulation, carbohydrate use, and really when the body is stressed and needs to do something, needs to act, adrenaline, epinephrine, they can be very helpful. And also used as neurotransmitters, as these nerve chemicals in the body when we need to actually create change in certain activities of the body. We'll leave it at that. All right, folks, so very good. I'm going to stop recording.